There are many people who can quote the famous part of Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, I have a dream. And maybe they can quote the end, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Which of course comes from an old spiritual song. But how many people remember the text of the speech? What the dream was about, not in generalities, but in detail. For we know that the dream was about racial equality in general. However, it got very specific. Joseph's dream was very specific about how his brothers would act. If we take a moment and look at Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, he says in Georgia, children of slaves and children of slave owners would sit down together. In Mississippi, the sweltering heat of injustice and oppression would be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. That his children, his 4 children, would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by their character. And in Alabama, boys and girls of different colors would sit together as sisters and brothers. It is a very specific dream, one that was almost 60 years ago, and one that unfortunately we might not be any closer to having come true. The reading that we have for this Bible study is long. And it's the end of the reading that for me is the most remarkable part. As a refresher on the story, Joseph has a dream. He's going to be great, and he tells his brothers, and his brothers aren't happy about that, and they sell him into slavery. Eventually, the brothers need food because there's a famine in the land. And they end up in Pharaoh's court, where Joseph has a position of authority. After some back and forth, his brothers tell their father that Joseph is alive, and they all move near Egypt. Joseph's father dies, and his brothers plead for mercy. And after that, his brothers report these words of Joseph's father, Jacob, to Joseph. Say to Joseph, I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now, therefore, please forgive the crime of the servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. I find it remarkable that Jacob asked Joseph to forgive his brothers. Think about that for a moment. His brothers had passed Joseph off as dead, caused pain and hardship to their father, all because they didn't like a dream that he had. And in some ways, it's not just Joseph who needs to forgive his brothers. Jacob had to be willing to do that too. And I guess he did, because if he hadn't have, he probably wouldn't have appealed to Joseph as he did. So let's look at forgiveness. The word forgive, nasa, has a number of different meanings. It's used over 600 times in the Hebrew Scriptures, and what struck me when I looked at it in the Hebrew was there is this sense not only of forgiveness, but of carry, of lift up, of raise. Which leads us to the first question in today's study. What have you been carrying that needs forgiveness? It could be that you need to offer forgiveness or that you need to receive forgiveness. Take a moment, pause the video if you wish, and think about what you have been carrying that needs forgiveness. I know that when I've both offered and received forgiveness, I've felt lifted up, like a weight that I've been carrying has been taken from me. Which leads to the second question. How do we lift up people who have been systemically oppressed? While Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech was about one particular movement at one particular point in time, it still has applications today, here as well as in the U.S., and not just with black Canadians, but also with Indigenous peoples and people of color. How do we lift people up who have been systemically oppressed? Again, take a moment, pause the video if you wish, and think about how we lift people up who have been systemically oppressed. If you've taken some time and have some answers to either one of those questions and want to drop me a note, please do so. Maybe it is the dreamers who can help us move, as Joseph did, to a place of forgiveness and to a place of freedom. I'll see you again in a few days. Until then, peace and blessings to you.